All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing a total paradigm shift on how we look at early-stage varicoceles. For decades, the whole narrative has been stuck on these traditional, surgery-only assumptions. But today, we're literally tossing those out the window. We are diving straight into the incredibly dynamic science of vascular biology. If you already know a bit about this space, get ready, because you're about to see it through a completely new lens.
So, look at this. For 50 years, researchers have basically only asked one thing: which surgery is best? They completely ignored the actual biology of the vein itself. It's kind of like arguing over which saw you should use to cut off a branch without ever stopping to ask, hey, is this branch actually alive? Could it thrive if we just gave it a better environment?
And that brings us to the real question. Can this living tissue, the pampiniform plexus, actually recover? Has it crossed the point of no return, or can it still adapt and stabilize? You gotta remember, every single cell in that vein is alive. So we really need to figure out if we can shift the environment enough to trigger biological healing, rather than just watching it progressively take damage.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The core problem. 2. The biological battlefield. 3. An engineering and pressure problem. 4. The conservative recovery protocol. And 5. The reverse remodeling reality. We're going to start deep down in the cellular science, and I promise you, we'll wrap up with a highly actionable protocol.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the core problem, and why we've been asking the wrong question.
This right here perfectly captures our paradigm shift. We are officially done looking at this like a passive plumbing issue. It's not just a broken pipe that dilates and needs to be ripped out. The new view recognizes your vein as a highly active, living ecosystem. It's packed with endothelial cells, smooth muscle, and this incredible extracellular matrix that constantly responds to everything you do.
Moving on to Section 2, let's zoom way in on the biological battlefield, the cellular ecosystems.
All right, meet KLF2. You can basically think of this guy as the master switch for the health of your blood vessels. When KLF2 is activated, it cranks up your beneficial nitric oxide and your natural antioxidant defenses. At the exact same time, it slams the brakes on inflammation and clotting. It's literally regulating your protective glycocalyx layer, which means preserving your endothelial cells has to be your absolute top priority.
To really wrap your head around this, I want you to picture your vein as an active construction site. On one side, you've got your builders. These are your fibroblasts laying down fresh collagen bricks, TIMPs that act as natural brakes on tissue breakdown, and that healthy nitric oxide we just talked about. But on the other side, you've got the demolition crew. We're talking matrix metalloproteinases, or MMPs, and oxidative stress. Look, if this demolition crew outpaces your builders, your tissue is going to degrade, and it doesn't matter how much collagen you're eating, the demolition crew will win.
And man, this leads us to phenotypic switching. It's a frankly terrifying vascular phenomenon, where your smooth muscle literally suffers an identity crisis and starts driving the disease. Healthy smooth muscle, it's contractile. It keeps the vein tight and organized. But when it's under chronic stress, it becomes synthetic. It stops contracting altogether and instead starts pumping out inflammatory cytokines and those destructive MMPs. It literally starts tearing down its own walls.
Okay, let's zoom back out for Section 3, an engineering and pressure problem.
Let's just look at the pure physics here for a second. Gravity is on 24/7. And because we humans walk upright, we create this massive hydrostatic column of blood that is constantly pressing down on this vascular bridge. So fundamentally, we're looking at a biological structure that is failing under the sheer weight of chronic, abnormal mechanical loading.
And you know what's crazy? Everyday actions just multiply that intra-abdominal pressure. We're talking about hidden biomechanical stressors that you probably don't even think about. Your vertical posture, anatomical quirks like nutcracker syndrome, the Valsalva disaster, holding your breath while you're lifting heavy at the gym, chronic coughing, and yeah, even poor toilet posture. Every single one of these sends a massive pressure spike right down into those compromised veins, just crushing your body's ability to repair itself.
Because of all these mechanical stressors, your calf muscle is essentially your second heart. Seriously, walking is such an insanely underrated mechanical intervention for taking the load off your veins. Think about it. When you sit at a desk all day, that pump is totally inactive. Your blood just pools. But when you walk, you actively engage that calf muscle to physically push venous blood back up against gravity. Plus, it improves circulation and triggers that incredibly protective KLF2 signal we were just geeking out over.
And this is exactly why swimming might just be the single most elegant exercise for varicocele recovery. I mean, it literally checks all the biomechanical boxes at once. You're horizontal, so boom, the hydrostatic gravity load is completely gone. Plus, you get the benefit of natural tissue cooling, a super low Valsalva burden, and the continuous rhythmic squeezing of your calf pump. It is an absolute engineering marvel for your vascular health.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Conservative Recovery Protocol.
All right, let's get into the actionable stuff. Here is a super simple but profoundly effective morning sequence that immediately unloads pressure and tells your endothelial cells to start repairing. First, hydrate. Drink about half a liter of water right when you wake up to thin out your blood viscosity. Second, get outside. Get 5 to 15 minutes of sunlight in your eyes to properly align your cortisol. And third, walk for 5 to 15 minutes, just to fire up that calf pump. It is an immediate, incredibly powerful biological reset to start your day.
Now for the S-tier supplement hierarchy. Notice that these are definitely not just random vitamins you grab off the shelf. This is a highly targeted biological toolkit. You've got MPPF, that's diosmin and hesperidin, which directly targets your venous physiology to increase tone. Then, ubiquinol Q10 steps in to shield your mitochondria from spitting out destructive free radicals. L-carnitine helps your cells handle energy efficiently, and omega-3 is in there actively suppressing systemic inflammation and shutting down those MMP demolition crews we talked about earlier.
But here's the catch. Supplements absolutely cannot work without the raw materials. Balancing minerals like copper is totally essential if you want to actually mortar the bricks of your venous walls. You need adequate dietary protein for the structural infrastructure. And then you need perfectly balanced copper to activate lysyl oxidase, or LOX. That's the specific enzyme it cross-links and gives actual physical tensile strength to your collagen and elastin.
Let's move into our final section, Section 5, the reverse remodeling reality.
We really need to redefine what success looks like here. True biological recovery isn't about the vein just magically disappearing overnight. We are talking about something called reverse remodeling. It's this biological process where, sure, a damaged tissue might remain structurally altered or a bit larger, but it functionally stabilizes. It stops actively degrading. Over time, it actually becomes significantly healthier, mechanically stronger, and way less inflammatory.
And if you need a hopeful precedent, just look at the heart and liver. Modern medicine used to think heart failure and liver fibrosis were totally irreversible, a complete one-way street. But now, we know that under highly optimized conditions, those tissues can partially reverse their damage and stabilize. So if cardiac and liver tissues can undergo reverse remodeling, you better believe the connective vascular tissues in your veins possess that exact same dynamic cellular machinery.
Especially when you're looking at an early stage or a grade 1 varicocele, you still have living biology in there. This means important valve maintenance pathways like FOXC2 and PROX1 might still be highly active. You are not dealing with completely destroyed tissue yet. You've still got viable endothelial cells, preserved smooth muscle, and surviving valve cells. Basically, you have the actual structural foundation you need to launch a real biological comeback.
Ultimately, healing is this continuous cascading loop of micro-recoveries. When you mechanically unload the vein, like by walking more and fixing your posture, you trigger a massive chain reaction. That unloading leads to endothelial recovery, which recouples your enos, drops your oxidative stress, fires the MMP demolition crew, and finally allows your extracellular matrix to stabilize and reinforce itself.
So I'm going to leave you with this somewhat provocative thought about your own daily habits. Are you feeding the demolition crew, or are you empowering the builders? Because your biology is constantly reacting to the environment you provide for it. If you can just tip the scales so that your body's natural repair mechanisms outpace the daily degeneration, you completely shift the paradigm of your vascular health. All right, that is it for this explainer. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and remember to keep asking those tough biological questions.